I'm Bob Finley, and this is The Other Side of the Bell.
Hello, and welcome to The Other Side of the Bell, a podcast dedicated to everything trumpet, brought to you by Bob Reeves Brass. We'll help you take your trumpet playing to the next level. I'm John Snell, trumpet specialist at Bob Reeves Brass, and I'll be your host for today. My special guest this episode is trumpeter, composer, and podcast host Anthony Plog. We'll get to Tony's interview here in a minute after a word from our sponsor and some trumpet news. Today's episode is brought to you by Bob Reeves Brass, who share your passion for creating extraordinary music. You know that feeling when your instrument just clicks and the music flows effortlessly? That's what Bob Reeves Brass has been helping customers do since 1968. We've helped brass musicians like you achieve their dreams by ensuring their equipment is always in perfect harmony. We know you want to immerse yourself in the art of music making, and we're here to remove any barriers between you and your creative vision. At Bob Reeves Brass, we work closely with you to understand your unique needs and provide tailored solutions like valve alignments, custom-fit mouthpieces from our extensive stock models or a hand-carved custom mouthpiece, gap adjustments with the Reeves sleeve system, or even tweaking your existing gear. No matter your level of experience, we offer free consultations and serve musicians from all walks of life. And if you're looking for the perfect instrument to inspire your next musical masterpiece, we proudly carry the exquisite Van Laar line of trumpets and flugelhorns, as well as the superb Charlie Davis line of trumpets. What's more, Bob Reeves Brass is taking their commitment to your musical journey even further. We're now offering a carefully curated collection of top-notch products designed specifically for brass musicians. You'll find premium guard bags to protect your beloved instruments, a diverse range of mutes from renowned brands like Ulvain mutes, Yupon and Okura mutes from Japan, Trumcore mutes, Rayano, Clary Wood mutes, and Charlie Davis mutes, ensuring you have the perfect mute for every performance. But that's not all. We've also got you covered when it comes to essential maintenance supplies, with a hand-picked selection of valve oils, lubricants, and more to keep your instruments in tip-top shape. Bob Reeves Brass is truly your one-stop shop for everything you need to fuel your passion and create music that touches hearts and souls. So go ahead, let us help you elevate your sound to new heights. Don't wait another moment to elevate your musical journey with Bob Reeves Brass. Connect with us at bobreeves.com, shoot us an email at info@bobreeves.com, and keep up with the latest news on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter at Bob Reeves Brass. Embrace your passion for music and let Bob Reeves Brass be your partner in creating the extraordinary. Well, I'd like to welcome all of the new listeners that we got after last episode with Dave Trigg, and also thank you for all of the great feedback we got. I know Garrett checked in, and Ryan, and a lot of folks wanted to thank me for having Dave on. Again, a legend in the lead player world, a legend in Broadway, and a guy that not a lot of folks, especially around the world, know about, just because he's doesn't do social media and website and all that kind of stuff. So I love finding those kinds of players, and so thankful to have Dave Trigg on last episode. And if you didn't listen to it, we have a lot of great stories from the Ringling Brothers Circus to Maynard Ferguson's big band and Broadway and Natalie Cole. We talked about a lot of stuff last episode, so check it out. This week, in fact, in 3 days, I am heading to the airport to go to Kingsville, Texas for the National Trumpet Competition at Texas A&M University in Kingsville. So we are proud to sponsor the large trumpet ensemble division this year, and also the mariachi group at NTC. So that's a big step for us, and proud to help support a wonderful organization. If you are going, competing, or your students are competing, or you're just going because you live in and around Kingsville and Corpus Christi, we will be there with 300 plus mouthpieces for trumpet, cornet, flugelhorn, piccolo trumpet, including our secret menu items like our 19 backbore and our orchestral line of mouthpieces. So you get a chance to play those We will also have all of the mutes and things that we carry. Unfortunately, we're out of guard bags. We have a few tacos, so we might bring those. We do have some Shire's trumpets, a wonderful custom C trumpet. Some of the Q series we'll have there. Some wonderful Van Laar B flat and C trumpets. Some Charlie Davis trumpets. And last but not least, we will be doing valve alignments. So if you go to bobreeves.com/NTC 2024, that's N as in national, T as in trumpet, C as in competition, 2024. You can get all the details for our booth and the link to prepay, schedule your valve alignment because slots are limited. You can save up to $50. Again, that's this weekend, March 8th through 11th at Texas A&M University in Kingsville. I hope to see you there. But wait, there's more. Lest I forget, our good friends, Greg Black Mouthpieces, will be at our booth. All of them weren't able to come to NTC this year, and so we are excited to host them at our booth. I believe Justin from Greg Black will be there with a huge selection of trumpet mouthpieces. So it's kind of like a one-stop shop for trumpet players. You can either get a Reeves mouthpiece, and if nothing there works for you, you can get a Greg Black mouthpiece, and vice versa, and try some great horns and get a valve alignment. See you this weekend on the other side of Texas. The other thing I wanted to briefly mention, of course, is that we are carrying Shire's instruments. If you have any trombone player friends, we have a great selection of trombones, bass trombones, both the Q series and 6 or 7 of the custom horns, which are hard to come by. And we're slowly amassing the Shire's trumpet line. We have plenty of Q series in stock, and I have a wonderful custom C trumpet. So if you're in the market for a horn, definitely consider Shire's. Come in and try them out. That's all I have for today. Hope to see you folks in Texas this weekend and later on the radar. Never too early to plan. ITG will be out here in Anaheim at the end of May. William Adam Trumpet Festival will be in Central Washington in June. And we are working on a Europe and an Australia trip. So follow us on social media, get on our email list, all the things so you don't miss out because we may be coming to your neck of the woods. All right, that's it for today. Let's get right to my interview with Anthony Plog. Anthony Plog is renowned internationally for his extraordinary skills as a trumpet player, composer, and educator. From an early age, he showcased his remarkable talent for the trumpet, playing with the Los Angeles Philharmonic at just 19 and later joining prestigious orchestras globally. As a soloist, Plog has captivated audiences in the United States, Europe, Australia, and Japan, earning acclaim for his recordings. His trumpet playing combines technical mastery with deep musicality, setting him apart as a leading figure in the music world. In addition to his performance career, Tony has enriched the musical repertoire with compositions ranging from operas to symphonic and chamber works, with a special emphasis on brass instruments. His notable works include operas addressing complex themes and compositions celebrating environmental and social causes. Tony also imparts his extensive knowledge to the next generation of musicians through teaching positions at major music conservatories and his innovative online coaching program. His contributions to music education, particularly for brass players, underscore his commitment to nurturing talent globally. What's more, Tony hosts his own podcast, Anthony Plog on Music, where he has conversations with some of the most fascinating and accomplished musicians of our time, including performers, composers, and entrepreneurs. And now, without further ado, here's my interview with Anthony Plog. I'm so excited to have, all the way from Freiburg, Germany, Tony Plog with me today. Tony, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
And let's start from the beginning because you've had such a varied career. But I want to start right in the beginning with the trumpet. So when did you first start playing trumpet? How did it come about? What did that look like?
Well, I actually, when I was 9 years old, I took piano. My parents wanted me to take piano, and I did that for about a year and never practiced. And my dad, I was a pretty normal kid, I think, and my dad taught brass instruments, trumpet and trombone mainly. And so he said, okay, you're going to take either trumpet or trombone. And I am still not very tall, but I was very small at that time. So it had to be the trumpet because I couldn't reach the 7th position. So that's how I got started on the trumpet. And for maybe about the first 6 years, maybe until I was 16 or so. I was sort of on and off with practicing. Like I said, I was a normal kid who just wanted to do sports and all that sort of stuff. And occasionally I'd practice a fair amount, and quite often I'd be a normal kid and wouldn't practice much at all. And then I sort of caught fire, I guess, when I was in junior college, Glendale Junior College, a little bit maybe at the end of high school. I was in high school, in terms of like where you are in status. The top rung is like the all-star quarterback on the football team. Way, 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 way down there is the cute little trumpet player who can play Java, and that was me. So I eventually got more and more interested in it, and by the time I was in junior college and joined the American Youth Symphony, then I really caught fire and really started practicing a lot.
So you really got the bug.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you mentioned your father taught different brasses. Was he a musician himself? Did he play or just teach? Or?
He was. Yeah, he played trombone in the big band era.
Oh,
and he
cool.
taught. Actually, there's still a memorial scholarship in his name for in the International Trumpet Guild, Clifton Plog Scholarship, because I think in his lifetime he taught somewhere between 500 to 600 students.
Wow.
So, yeah, he did a lot of teaching. And so my afternoons, I mean, I would, I could even take a nap as a kid with trumpets playing in the next room. I was so used to it.
So you're just surrounded by it all the time?
All the time. Yeah, all the time.
So was he your primary teacher, or did he pass you off to someone else to teach you?
Yeah, he started me out. So I'd say maybe I took about the first maybe 3 or 4 years with my dad, 3 years perhaps. And then my father was a teacher of Irving Bush from the Philharmonic, and was almost like a surrogate father for Irving. And so we had very close family connections. So my dad said, okay, now you're going to study with Irving. And so I studied with Irving for about, I think, a total of maybe about 6 years. And he was a great, great teacher and really got me grounded in fundamentals and orchestral excerpts and, just everything that a young student should learn. And then he said that there's a new person who joined the LA Philharmonic as third trumpet, and I think you should take from him. And at the time I was a little bit sad because I thought, well, maybe he's thinking that I'm not working hard for him or he's not happy with my progress. But I realized what he was trying to do was give me to somebody else who could give me new ideas. And that new third trumpet player in the LA Philharmonic was Tom Stevens. And I think actually maybe I was Tom's first student in Los Angeles, I think, because Tom had just joined the orchestra. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So what was that like? I mean, so you were doing fundamentals and with Irving and orchestral excerpts. How did anything shift when you went over, started studying with Tom?
Yeah, it's interesting. Irving, he also worked a lot on transposition, but out of the Caffarelli book, and then Tom worked on the Saxa book, and Saxa, and really, really drilled me on that. I think the difference, they were both great. So it's like two sides of a really nice coin, shall we say. I mean, I was extremely lucky in the teachers that I had, starting with my father and then Irving and then Tom. Irving was more basics, I guess, and all the necessities that you would need. And then Tom was more concept, I guess you would say. And I would leave lessons with Tom on one hand being depressed, thinking that there was so little that I knew about music, and at the same time being inspired because I was learning so much. So Irving was more, straight ahead, I guess, and Tom was more sort of charismatic and how should I put it? Yeah, just more on concept and musicality. Irving was musicality and trumpet. Tom was basically not trumpet at all. It was just, well, it was in terms of you have to get a bigger sound and all that kind of stuff, but not how to do it. And Irving was more how to do it. And Tom was more just musical ideas that he got from Vacchiano.
Fascinating. So how long did you stay with Tom?
Actually, it was basically one summer. Every couple of weeks. Yeah, every couple of weeks I'd get a lesson. It lasted about 2 hours. And then occasionally I'd go back and get a lesson. And I remember I after my first job, which was the San Antonio Symphony, I came back. I was 25 years old, and I called Tom up and I said, "Could I get a lesson?" And he said, "Come on, we're colleagues now. You don't need a lesson." And I said, "No, I really want a lesson." I went over there, and he said, "What do you want to play?" And I played a Bordoni, just 8 bars, and I thought I played quite well. And I got finished, and he said, "What in the hell have you been doing these last 3 years?" And that was just typical Tom. That he
Oh no.
yeah, I only got one comment the whole time I studied with him, which was, "What did you do wrong? That sounded good." But he was, for me, because I was so incredibly hungry as a student. I was practicing 6 hours a day during that summer. I just loved it. It was really great.
Wow. What did that 6 hours look like? I mean, was it fundamentals? Was it excerpts? Was it solo literature? A little bit of everything?
Yeah, the way I did it was I'd do 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon, 2 hours in the evening. And I wouldn't necessarily recommend that for anybody now, the way I practice, because I had cuts in my lip, actually. I was practicing so much. But I did a lot of excerpts. I did a lot of transposition. I think and just a lot of music. I think not these days. I think people are a little bit more into trumpet stuff, and I didn't, like Stamp or Chikowitz, and I had not studied with Stamp at that time, and so it was just learning. I'd have to prepare like maybe 3 or 4 page-long transposition etudes. So I would basically, in the course of 2 weeks, essentially learn them from memory. And then, because I wanted to get really good at transposition, I would sight read every day in every key. So I'd start out, for example, like in F. I'd do my warm up and maybe a flow study or a Conconi or something, and then I'd take the saxo book and just randomly flip to a page and think, okay, I'm going to sight read the right side. So I'd read that and in F, and then I'd practice something else for another 15 minutes, and then I'd flip to another page and sight read that in E, and work my way down to G flat, so that I covered all the keys each day for a summer. And I could really, by the end of that summer, I could really transpose well.
Wow, that's pretty intense, especially at a fairly young age too.
Yeah, but it wasn't work. I loved it. I mean, I was really having fun. That's probably sick, that you have that much fun with transposition, but I did.
And I mean, was your goal at this point to be an orchestral musician, or what were your inspirations?
Yeah, that was absolutely it. Yeah, I mean, my heroes were the guys in the LA Philharmonic, which in those days was Robert Duvall, the principal trumpet player. Tom was still third trumpet, so Irving Bush was second, Tom was third, and Mario Guarneri was a newly appointed fourth trumpet, and Mario and Tom played in the LA Brass Quintet together. So for me, what I absolutely wanted to do was play in an orchestra. I played a lot of chamber music also, but my goal was to be an orchestra player.
Wow. So you went through the Glendale Junior College. Did you then go on to? You said you went on to UCLA to do your degree, or where did you go?
Yeah. I got my bachelor's at UCLA. So 2 years at Glendale Junior College and 2 years at UCLA.
And then hit the audition circuit, or were you freelancing?
Well, I was freelancing. By that time, by the end of my time at UCLA, I was getting called to play some extra with the LA Philharmonic, which was fantastic and intimidating at the same time. I mean, I would show up to rehearsals an hour and a half early and still be afraid that I was going to be late or pick the wrong time or something. So I was freelancing. Not a huge career or anything like that, but I was doing some freelancing, and I had taken some auditions. And then I got into the San Antonio Symphony and I played the last 6 weeks of one season, and I had 3 years with the orchestra.
Now, and gosh, my brain's leaving me. Who did you play in San Antonio with?
Well, okay, no problem with your brain. I think your brain is fine. It's better than mine. The first year is actually, it's 3 different sections in a way. The first year, I was new, and the other 2 main players were Bill Sullivan was first. Sorry, not Bill Sullivan. He was with the Utah Symphony. Bill Snyder. See, my brain is going too. Yeah, Bill Snyder was principal, and I think my first year I was associate principal. and then Bill Haer, Haerr, was second. Both real gentlemen, and they were really, really kind to me. And then my second year, they both retired. And Bill Bing, has been interviewed on your program, came in, and Glenn Fischel, who later played many years with the San Francisco Symphony as principal trumpet.
Bill Bing, I should know him. He was my trumpet teacher. He's like a second father to me. Yeah. The San Antonio connection was clicking. So you were in there with Bill and Glenn Fischel, which must have been fun.
It was fun. Bill was actually a roommate of mine. Bill and Warren Greff, the three of us roomed together, and we just had great times. There's so many stories that we have. One was that I'm sure if Bill listens to this, he will appreciate this. There was a dog that would always come by and eat the scraps from our plate. And I remember at dinner, and I remember once I cooked a meal that was so bad, even the dog wouldn't eat it afterwards. Pooch was what we named him. But anyway, Bill played in the section, and Glenn Fischel, who was a phenomenal player, was even crazier than Bill. So it was really, really a fun year.
And then you ended up in Utah next. Is that correct?
Yeah. What happened? My third year. And the section of third year then was Glenn left, and he was replaced by Ed Gornick. So it was myself, Bill Bing, and Ed Gornick. And I was fired, actually, at the end of my third year. And I had planned to make that my last year anyway, so it worked out okay. And sort of a long story, so I don't want to bore you with that, but it was actually a very good experience for me. I learned a lot from that experience. And so I came back to LA for a year, and then I got in the Utah Symphony.
So in your audition prep, I mean, was there anything special you were doing, or was it just, you're just practicing still 6 hours a day and covering everything, or was there something you would do like ramp up to an audition?
I don't think I ramped up to auditions, and I think what I see with students now is a little bit different than the way I did it, and it was maybe just a different time, but I practice excerpts constantly. I would go through the excerpt books, and even things that were not asked for auditions, if they were in the excerpt book, I knew them. I played them, and I listened to records all the time. So it's not that I just knew the excerpt, but I knew the piece because I loved the Bartok Concerto for Orchestra, or a Bruckner Symphony, or a Mahler Symphony, or whatever, and had a recording or two of the different pieces. So when there was an audition, it was not in a way like I had to prepare for the audition, because I had already played them so many times. And I had mixed results on auditions. Some of the times I did well, some of the times I didn't do so well. But I think that's probably the way it is with most people. I think now people, if there's a negative of the way things are done these days, it's that people don't know the entire piece. They just know the excerpt. Not always, but it seems like that happens more often. And then when they prepare for an audition, then they take time away from their regular practice schedule to practice excerpts. But for me, excerpts were just part of the normal schedule that I always had, because I wanted to play in an orchestra.
That was your goal.
Yeah, and it's almost like if you love basketball and you're out shooting baskets and you're thinking, I'm Michael Jordan with 3 seconds left. I would think, okay, I'm Bud Hurst in the Chicago Symphony with Mahler's Fifth, or something like that. So I was like a kid in a candy store with the excerpts in a way.
That's I love the analogy to sports, and Mike Sachs does that a lot too. So maybe that's where he got it from.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah,
and the UCLA and all of that. Yeah, the Coach Wooden and
he was there. He was there. He was the coach when I was a student at UCLA, and in those days, his name was Lou Alcindor. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was a student there on that basketball team. And wow. It was a great basketball team. They were winning championships right and left. And in the student union, I would say to friends, watch this. And I'd go walk next to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and my head would come up to about his belt. He was that tall. And maybe I was that small, but that was a great time.
Oh man, I wish there was a photo of that somewhere. That'd be cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you went to Utah. How was your experience there?
Great. I was the first. I was there 2 years. In the first year, I was assistant principal trumpet. Second year, associate. Bill Sullivan was the principal trumpet player. Shelley Hyde was the second trumpet player, and it was an interesting section, a great section in terms of personalities, because both Bill and Shelley had a great sense of humor. Shelley was a lot more inappropriate than Bill, but they were both very funny. Bill had been president of the Musicians Union, and Shelley was the personnel manager. So on one hand, you had somebody who was very management, and on one hand, you had somebody who was sort of anti-management. And yet, it was a really great section to play with. It was really fun to play with those people.
Awesome. And what eventually brought you back to LA?
I had this lesson, actually, when I was in San Antonio. I flew to Chicago, and I had a lesson with Adolf Herseth, who was my hero. Mm-hmm. And it was a great lesson, but it took about 2 years for the real lesson to sink in for me. And the real lesson was, I'm never going to be Adolf Herseth. I'm never going to be able to have that physical strength, and I'm never going to be able to have that mental strength. And I realized that what I was good enough to play in Utah Symphony, because that's not a super big orchestra back then. And I felt like I did fine there. But playing in Chicago Symphony, Philadelphia, New York, whatever, I could probably play extra, but I don't know that if I'd be able to fit into the section for sure as a principal trumpet player. And I had done some solos, and I felt, I could actually, this is more to what I'm suited for, is maybe playing solos. And I just started to compose. So I thought, okay, I'm going to come back to LA, burn the bridges. And I tend to be very idealistic with things to the detriment of my finances. And I came back to LA with the idea of pursuing a solo career and trying to be a composer.
Wow. How old were you at that time? I mean, that's a big shift. And
yeah, it is. And I have a friend, Ron Kidd, who says I'm the only person he knows who every career decision I make goes towards less money. And that certainly was the case there, because I was really struggling when I got back to LA. But I was 28 at the time when I came back.
Wow. I mean, that's really, to me, amazing to think about that at 28, and you've already had some major symphony positions, and, you're on this upward trajectory in the orchestra world, to then say, I don't have that realization that I don't have what it takes to do what somebody like Bud Herseth does.
Yeah.
That's incredible. So take us through that. So you come to LA, you're struggling financially. I mean, you start picking up gigs, and you start networking. What did that look like?
Yeah, I was very lucky, because about a month before I left Utah, I got a call from Tom Stevens that, I think it was Tom gave me a call, that they were looking for a trumpet teacher at Cal State Northridge. And so I got a job as a trumpet teacher at Cal State Northridge. And that's a job. It's not like a regular job. You just pay by the student rather than a salary, for your teaching. But still, that helped out. And then just playing in, I had played in community symphonies before. So just playing in community symphonies, and I forget how I got in the Pasadena Symphony, but got in the Pasadena Symphony. And Russ Kidd, still a very good friend of mine, was first trumpet. And when he left, then I moved up to first trumpet. And I guess you just gradually start to get more jobs. And I did a few studio jobs, but I was never like one of the main studio players at all.
Did your connections from LA, did that help out when you moved back? I mean, you mentioned maybe Tom Stevens. I don't forget about Bill Bing out here by then, or
Bill played one. Yeah, I think Bill was back. Bill played after I left the San Antonio Symphony. I think Bill had one more year in San Antonio, and so by the time I got back from Utah, Bill, I feel, was certainly back in Los Angeles.
So working as a freelancer. You're able to do extra in the LA Phil, and then you ended up winning the job at the LA Chamber Orchestra. Is that correct?
Yeah, actually, in those days, the LA Chamber Orchestra was not a salaried orchestra. It was also like a freelance orchestra.
That's
and
right.
So
later.
Yeah, and so I had gotten called. I don't know if it was the last minute or not, but I got called to play I remember the Barbara Capricorn Concerto and the Onegger, I think it's Symphony Number 2 that's with strings, but the last maybe 15 measures adds trumpet. And over a course of time, I played those two pieces, and then I just started getting called as the principal trumpet player. And so I wasn't playing all the time with them, but when they would do a Mozart symphony or something else, then I'd play those concerts.
Mm-hmm. So between the freelancing and the teaching, you were able to make ends meet. You had mentioned you had started composition and you wanted to go the solistic route. So, I mean, was that a shift in your practicing? Was that a shift in, developing your own personal brand or yourself as a soloist?
Yeah, I think, well, a couple of things that I did. One was, I started making records with Crystal Records that I had to pay for, so that was keeping me broke. But that's really what I wanted to do. And in making the records, I wanted to record music a lot of music that had not been done before. So I felt like I was adding to the repertoire. That's a lot more difficult today because so many pieces have been recorded. But a number of the pieces that I recorded back then had either not yet been recorded, or if they were recorded, maybe not on a big company, so people didn't know about them. And so I felt like I was, with the recordings, I was helping my career, but also hopefully contributing to the literature a little bit. So I think that's the main thing I did. Back then, I don't even know if the word brand was in use, that somebody developing their brand. So I was doing that and just trying to get concerts wherever I could. And it's, again, a long, slow process.
Mm-hmm. You talked about pulling new music that either hadn't been recorded or was on relatively small labels or small albums. I mean, how would you find out about the music? This is all pre-internet, right? And
yeah, right.
So word of mouth, or
yeah, I mean, just different ways. I mean, I recorded the Halsey Stevens, so that was a standard piece.
Mm-hmm.
One huge thing I haven't mentioned his name yet, or her name, William Schmidt and Sharon Davis. Sharon was the pianist that I worked with, and Bill was the publisher or the owner of Western International Music, and also a very, very fine composer. I think at one time, towards the end of our being in Los Angeles together, we realized that I had premiered, I think, 15 works of Bill. So he'd written extensively for trumpet. Mm-hmm. So that was one major connection that I had in terms of pieces that I recorded. And through his publishing company, I got to know some other composers. Some of the times it was just luck. I remember hearing there's an avant-garde piece that I ended up doing a lot by Robert Erickson called Krill, which has shouting and singing and stuff. And I first heard that, I think it was written for and also a little bit with Ed Harkins from San Diego. And I heard that on an International Trumpet Guild concert. Several years later, I was asked to play it. And it took me, I think, at least 3 months to learn it because it had all these new techniques in it. Mm-hmm. And I decided, okay, once I learned it, I'm going to play it a lot because it took so much time to learn. And it was even though it's extremely avant-garde, audiences loved it because it was very funny in places. Frank Campo, who's a Los Angeles composer, I did, I think, maybe 4 or 5 works of his, including later on a concerto. Mm-hmm. So I guess it's just sort of getting to know composers and being lucky, and asking.
Putting yourself out there and then stuff come across your desk.
Sometimes, yeah.
Or falls in your lap, times, right?
Yeah, or doesn't fall in your lap and you just keep trying.
Yeah. I mean, it's talking about this, I mean, there's nothing wrong with recording the Haydn for the 5 millionth time, but there's something about recording a brand new piece it just thinking about it makes me uncomfortable because
really?
you have nothing to, it's all you. So when you, let's say, take one of the works that you did, how much interaction was there with the composer in terms of the interpretation, or would you just go in and record it the way you thought it should go? I mean, what did that look like?
I guess that would depend on the piece. I think normally I sort of just went in and did it. I remember a story that Frank Campo told me about Tom Stevens, that he wrote a piece for Tom called Times, which is for unaccompanied trumpet, that I ended up playing at quite a bit. But Tom did the first recording, and a very difficult piece. And I think there's maybe 1 or 2 pages of notes at the beginning explaining the notation and all that sort of thing. And he gave the piece to Tom. Tom was going to record it. He wrote it for a recording that Tom was going to do. He gave the piece to Tom, and I think about 2 days later, called Tom back and said, "So Tom, whenever you have time, maybe we can get together for a cup of coffee and I can explain stuff to you." And Tom said, "Well, I've already recorded it." And so Frank listened to the recording, and he said it was everything that he wanted. And that's just Tom. Tom was a genius that way in terms of knowing how to approach that music. I think in my case, with William Schmidt, we talked a lot about different things, I think. But with some other composers, maybe I didn't have that close of a connection with them, so I just, did the best job I could with it.
And then, you talked earlier about practicing 6 hours a day and playing excerpts and transpositions. So did your practicing shift as now you're delving into the soloist world, preparing pieces?
Yeah, sure. I didn't practice. I didn't practice, I would say, excerpts or transposition, as much or hardly at all. If I was playing a big piece on a symphony concert, then of course, be prepared. But I knew that and that music, and I didn't really have to do it. I think now I had changed my practice so that I was no longer, on a free day, I was no longer practicing 6 hours, but I felt that like 4 hours was better for me. 6 hours, I'd just be a little bit too beat up, and 4 hours seemed to be the best. So my practicing, without realizing it, I think my practicing would be either to try and get better on certain days, and other days would be sort of more maintenance to get me in the shape that I could play a concert or something like that. So it would vary, but I think if I was a young player now, I would practice differently than I did then. I think I would practice more soft stuff, more flow studies, more of the basics, and maybe a little bit less of excerpts and difficult stuff. In a way, so that I have a better base, and that my chops would be more supple, let's say.
Not beat up.
And I think also, not beat up, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think if I was a young player now, I would also spend time doing mental exercises or mental studies. Because back then, I think, it's just do the best you can, and hopefully you don't get nervous. But now I think there seems to be so much science in terms of the mental approach to playing that I think if I was a young student now, I'd want to take advantage of that.
Well, let's dig into that. What do you think? Where would you start with that? Is it the mindset, or is it emotional mastery, or what? Or all the above? Maturity? I don't know. Right?
Yeah. Well, my wife and I say you can only be young once, but you can be immature forever. So I've checked that box. And emotional mastery, forget that. I'm not even close on that one. Yeah. I think, there's several people who are recognized experts in the field now for mental training. So depending on the money, that I would have, at the very least, I would read their books. And if I had the money to get lessons from them, I would try to do that also. So I think that's where I would go now. The interesting thing to me is that you can spend a lot of time practicing the trumpet or whatever instrument and get better and better and better, and then get nervous at an audition and it doesn't matter. And so why not spend some time developing that aspect of your playing into a skill also? One thing I think about a lot is the difference between talent and skill. And talent is what you're sort of born with, what you're given, and skill is how you develop that. So there are some people who are not particularly talented who end up being really skilled because they work a lot and they work very smart. And there's some other people who are maybe quite talented that maybe are not as skilled as some other less talented players because they are maybe lazy or they don't go about it the right way or whatever. The optimal, of course, is if you're very talented and you have all the mental capacity to work hard and work smart. So I think for me, if I was younger now, I would try to work smarter in terms of developing my, what would you say, my nerves, maybe, so that I would feel like that in basically all situations, I would be comfortable under pressure. And I don't think I was necessarily bad under pressure, but there are a couple of times when I for sure could have done better.
Fascinating. You mentioned a couple resources or places you would go. What can you mention those?
Yeah, sure. Bill Williams is one who is up in Santa Barbara now. And he studied with Don Green, and I think Don Green is maybe the top person. There's also, and he's Asian, and I forget his name, who teaches at Juilliard. So I think there are a number of people where you can probably find videos of them online, and you have to be careful that you get one of the experts and not a charlatan. But there are several people who are very scientific and very studied about the way they do things.
Yeah. And then, because that's a whole other side of what we do as performers that, I think like you mentioned, we'll spend 6 hours a day working on fingers and chops and ears and all that stuff, but not not what's up here. And that's what could burn you on an audition or in a performance or whatever. And just for clarification, that Don Green is the one the author of the book, not the former principal trumpet of the LA Phil, with the same name.
Right. Yeah. Same name, different spelling though. Principal trumpet of the LA Phil. Yeah. Green, and the other is Greene.
Yeah, that's right. And the author Don Green also did a wonderful book with Annie Bosler on, I think it's on college auditions that's out there. A lot of great information from him as well. So well, I'm glad we got into that, because that's something that should be talked about more. So I want to talk about your influences for your solo playing. You had talked a lot. You had talked before about Tom Stevens. Was he one of your influences in terms of the style of music and the phrasing, or were you listening to other musicians?
Yeah, I mean, Tom was a huge influence. Herseth from Chicago, even though he was an orchestral player. He could play beautifully. I mean, he could sound like a flute. And so in terms of the colors that he could get, like if you listen to some of those Reiner recordings, he could play as strong as a lead player in a big band, but at the same time could sound like a flute on the next phrase. And that was a big influence for me, I'd say. So Tom, in terms of just his concept and the sound that he had with modern music, and Herseth. A little bit later on, I did a teaching exchange with Ed Tarr, who was a Baroque trumpet expert, and I taught Baroque trumpet in Basel, Switzerland. And so that, even though I was a terrible Baroque trumpet player, a natural trumpet player, it really influenced me in terms of the way I thought about phrasing and the use of harmony in phrasing with Baroque music, and then also with Romantic music and classical music, as an example.
So fascinating. And then the other thing I want to talk about in terms of as being a soloist, that when you're an orchestral trumpet player, you practice, you play the concert, you do great or you do bad, but it's done. It's over. Audience goes home and you're on to the next day. When you're a soloist and you record an album, it's out there forever. Is that something in your own as an artist, and not just, separate as a trumpet player, that went through your mind, or something you had to deal with, like in terms of, well, this is finally done, this piece, or if it's not, I know some artists are perfectionists and have a hard time letting things go. Did you have to struggle with that at all?
No, I didn't struggle with that. One difference between being an orchestral player and being a soloist is, if you're a soloist, you can choose your own repertoire. If you're sitting in an orchestra and you really have trouble with Zarathustra or Petrushka or whatever the piece is, and it comes down the pike, you've got to play it. But if you're a soloist and there's a particular piece that just doesn't fit the way you play, you just don't play it. So that's very easy. And then on a recording, you can do different takes. So for me, there was never really any pressure with recording. If it's, for example, if it was just trumpet and piano. Maybe if it was with a big group, then there'd be more pressure to get it right. But I think I didn't feel any pressure with recording. And I mean, there are going to be different interpretations of a piece, which is good. You know, music is not like a swim meet where you win by 0.9 of a second or something like that. There are many, many different ways of approaching a piece. So recording that I would do of a particular piece would just be that particular interpretation at that particular time. And certain pieces that Sharon and I played over a number of years, when we would record it, that was not like our definitive performance of the piece. That was just where we were at that particular time. And I remember we recorded the Halsey Stevens for trumpet and piano, and we had probably played that for 10 years before we recorded it. And with the second movement, we were always experimenting with the tempo, trying to find a tempo where we felt like we could really make it work, because it was a very difficult movement for us, or at least for me, to make work musically, because it was so static. It was a beautiful movement, but it was very difficult in terms of the flow and the architecture of the movement. And so the tempo that we had at the recording, I think it was a good tempo, but that's just sort of where we had settled at that particular time.
Fascinating. That's oh man, I wish I was back in college working on the Halsey Stevens again.
It's a great piece. It's a great piece.
I love it. It's one of my favorites. So, and during you doing all this recording, the solo playing, you're getting more into composition. Is that when did it? Was there a point when you started recording your own pieces? Just kind of happened naturally?
Yeah, well, the first piece I ever wrote, I was in college, called Mini Suite for brass quintet. 4 movements, it lasts less than 4 minutes long. So I didn't know how to develop any ideas. And I would write a brass piece once every 2 years, maybe, or a trumpet piece. And then I gradually started getting into some larger forms. I wrote a brass octet. I think that was around 1980. I wrote that for Ed Tarr's brass group in Europe. And then eventually I wrote a wind ensemble piece. I was teaching at USC, and I asked Bob Wojak, who was the wind ensemble conductor, if I could write a piece for the band. Would he do it? And he said, to my surprise, he said, yeah, write it. You know, so I did, and he performed it. And so I started gradually getting into larger works. And then I had this experience. I think it was December 20th, 1989. I was in Berlin to play a couple of concerts with organ and a couple of Christmas oratorios. And I had one free night, and I was staying with some people who lived right across from the Deutsche Oper. And that particular night, they were doing a ballet, the Romeo and Juliet of Prokofiev, which is one of my favorite pieces. And I went to that performance, and there was just something about that night that literally changed my life. I mean, I wrote down notes on the program, and I thought, I have to be a composer. And even if I fail as a composer, I can say my profession is the same as Prokofiev's. It was that idealistic of an evening for me. And so that was when I really made the decision to be a composer and not a trumpet player. And it took me another 10 years before I quit playing the trumpet. But that evening was a really important evening for me.
Just like that. It was like an epiphany.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, it was. I remember very clearly the end. I think it's the end of the second act, the death of Tybalt, that ends. It's this incredibly great music where they have the sword fight, and then the sort of the funeral dirge for Tybalt, and it ends on a C minor chord. And my hand just flew up to my mouth. I was so shocked, that I knew the music really well. I had some recordings of it and all of that, but there was just something about that I just thought, I have to do this. I have to try and be a composer. Even if I fail, this is what I have to do.
So you said it was a 10-year process, and I mean, you had been composing since college. I mean, did you study with composers, or was it all self-taught?
Yeah, all self-taught. But I was lucky in a way, because having played quintets, having played in orchestras, you have an idea of what works and what doesn't work. And I had a really important experience when I was maybe 21 or so. as a non-composer, they used to have a thing at the Hollywood Bowl called Marathon Days during the summer, where they would do, for example, they had a Stravinsky Marathon Day where the entire day chamber music from Stravinsky would be played, and then in the evening, I remember they did a Symphony of Psalms and the Rite of Spring, and there was just one rehearsal, and then this day of music, and so it was put on, sort of. Not super great organized or anything like that, but it was, I think it was pretty successful. And so they had one day that was a modern music day, and there was a composer who had written a piece for 7 trumpets. And I remember that some of the 7 trumpets were myself, Russ Kidd, who was a terrific player. Maybe Malcolm McNabb was playing. I'm not sure if Malcolm was playing. Ronnie Rom possibly was playing. Mario Guarnieri, Tom Stevens. It was a really, really great group. And this was a piece of about 15 minutes of just holding high notes and really high notes. And, changing, different people would change at different times. And after about 5 minutes, Tom, who could be very direct, raised his hand and said, "This is impossible to do." And this composer said, "Well, I'm sorry, but I wrote this for virtuoso players." And I thought, if I ever write music, I'm never going to be like that. And so what I do as a composer is I'll always ask players, please be critical, please be brutal in your criticism. And if somebody says, well, maybe this doesn't work, to me, that I translate that as this is a problem and I need to fix it. And everything that somebody says to me about a technical problem, when I correct it, it makes the piece better musically. So what I learned as a trumpet player early on is to really respect players because they know what works and what doesn't work. And if they say something doesn't work, if you can get them to say it, it's just going to make the piece better. So self-taught, but learning from other people also.
And we talked about your trumpet inspirations. What about your compositional inspirations?
Wow. Okay. Well, Bill Schmidt was a huge inspiration for me. He was really, without realizing it, really a mentor. His wife also, but Bill, being a composer, was a huge inspiration and influence for me. Then, of course, playing in orchestras, basically all the great composers. And when you sit in an orchestra, it's different than when you're sitting in the audience because you really hear how the music comes together, and it's so much more exciting than sitting in the audience. As exciting as it can be sitting in the audience, if you're playing in the middle of an orchestra in the Rite of Spring, it's amazing. It's just amazing. And so hearing that and being inspired by that, I'd say, Mahler, Prokofiev, Shostakovich, Tchaikovsky, Brahms, Bach, you name it. We're so lucky to be in the profession that we're in, where if you're a musician in an orchestra, you go to work every week surrounded by genius. People who have, let's say, other jobs don't have that opportunity or advantage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. And what brought you to Freiburg? I mean, you were down here in LA. Was it the traffic that got you, or do you think was it because of your composition? It would be better to be in Europe. What did that look like?
Well, what happened was I had moved back to Utah. I wanted to go back to Utah to try and pursue a solo career. That's when I decided to really burn the bridges and stop the freelancing in LA. I remember the first couple of times I turned down a studio job. That was really tough.
That's sacrilege out here.
yeah. But actually, I guess I'm a heathen in terms of LA freelancing. But I decided, I wanted to burn the bridges and try to, have a solo career. And like I said about my friend, saying, I'm the only person he knows who goes towards less money. That for sure, that was the case when I moved back to Salt Lake City to try and do solos. And I met my wife, Kathy, on a blind date. We've been married now over 30 years, and she had never been to Europe. So I wrote to a bunch of friends in Europe thinking that maybe I could do like a week or two of teaching master classes, whatever, that would get us over there. And then, we could see some of Europe. And one of the people that I wrote to was Boo Nielsen. Boo was Håkan Hardenberger's first teacher, and he was playing with the Malmö Symphony, second trumpet. And I had, on visits to Sweden, I always stayed with him, and we were good friends. And so he called Kathy. I was on the road with St. Louis Brass Quintet, and Kathy called me and said, call Boo immediately. So I called Boo, and he said, the first trumpet player, they're making him take a year off because of problems with alcohol. Would you be interested in playing with the orchestra? And so Kathy and I talked about it, and we thought, okay, let's go for it. So we ended up being in Sweden, in Malmö, Sweden, which is in southern Sweden, for 2 years, and got married in Sweden. Had a great wedding in the brass section, and Håkan Hardenberger played for our wedding. So that was a pretty spectacular wedding. Wow. The organist afterwards said, "Now that was a wedding," because the music was so good. I
have to know what. Sorry to interrupt. What did he play?
He played the first movement of the Hofhannes Sonata for trumpet and organ, which is a very quiet, reflective piece. And then he played, this is probably awful to say, but he played Trumpet Voluntary. And I think one of the reasons was I had played it so many times for so many weddings. I think I was interested in hearing what it sounded like from the other perspective of somebody getting married, not somebody playing for somebody getting married.
Wow.
So, I think he probably played a couple of other things too.
Well, let me know if you ever decide to renew your vows.
Okay.
And if Håkan does revisits that, because I'll fly out wherever it is to hear him play Prince of Denmark's March or Trumpet Voluntary.
Yeah, he was very, very kind to do that.
How neat. So you end up in Europe. You've been there 30 years now?
Over 30 years, yeah. We moved here we were in Sweden from 1990 to 92. We were in Italy for a very, very short time. And then I auditioned for the job in Freiburg and got the job teaching at the Musikhochschule in Freiburg.
Man, amazing. So, and you haven't played trumpet at all since then? When did you officially retire from trumpet?
Yeah, I was still playing when I started teaching, and actually ended up like having a half-time job with the Basel Symphony for 3 years, which is just about 45 minutes south of Freiburg. So I quit playing in 2001. I think it was 2001 that I quit playing. Mm-hmm. So
have you picked up the horn at all since then?
I play Happy Birthday about 3 or 4 times a year for relatives. And I'm very clever the way I do it, because like the height, like if I just only have a C trumpet now, so I'll play it in B flat, so the high notes in F, and I won't, the top part of the staff, and I'll just sort of play it as an eighth note, but something like that. So I don't even have to sustain it. So that's pretty much it. I did a concert actually maybe 4 years ago. Just one piece, the Light Eternal. I forget the exact name of the piece I think it was by Handel. And there's a really like state-of-the-art soprano. She sings worldwide. Her name is Maria Bengtsson, and we're very, very good family friends. And I ended up arranging for her first performance in the United States, which was at Stanford University, a recital, which was one of the greatest concerts I've ever heard in my life. And she said, well, I want to start with this piece for trumpet. And I said, well, great. There's some great players in San Francisco, thinking of Mark Inoue or Glenn Fischel or whoever. And she said, no, I want you to do it. We've never done anything together. And I said, no, I can't do that. But she gradually talked me into it. And so I had about 4 months to get ready to do this 2.5 minute piece with her. And I got through it okay. It was, if I was in my prime as a player, it would have been a lot better. It would have been a lot more musical, because I was just basically trying not to miss notes, because it was different. It's like if you aim for a basket, talking about sports, if you aim for a basket and you've been playing basketball and you're in the prime, you know exactly how to shoot. But now it was like I would have to shoot a little bit short or a little bit longer than I would normally shoot to be able to get the note. And so it's like every entrance I had to concentrate a lot on where am I going to place this note, So it was a unique experience for me.
but you made it through, and yeah,
I,
sounded like
I made it
a
through,
great
but I'm not
experience.
going to repeat it. I wouldn't say it was a great experience. It was great experience hearing Maria sing. That was phenomenal.
What fun. And so, I mean, with all your teaching and the composition, you have time to do a podcast that you started a few years ago. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Like, what was the impetus between wanting to do a podcast, and how did that go?
Well, my son talked me into it. He said, "Oh, you should do a podcast. I mean, you're going to get 100,000 downloads per podcast." Talk about not having a clue. But it's been really interesting for me. I don't think it's been hugely successful in terms of the number of downloads or whatever, but hopefully it's interesting for people. And I've learned a tremendous amount in doing it. My idea at the beginning was a little bit like the Tim Ferriss podcast. I don't know if you're familiar with him, where
Yeah, listen to
he
him.
tries to get the ideas of what makes people great at what they do. But more and more, I've started to think about like different aspects of music that I don't know anything about. And so I've had it, for example, I interviewed Anne Majette, who was for 11 years the music critic of the Washington Post. And she has a couple books out. And as preparation, I listened to her interviews and read her 2 books. And I mean, that was a great learning experience for me. So it's been a really interesting experience in terms of learning things about music and about life, that I had never thought of before.
Yeah, I mean, I preached walk the walk. I was trying. I'm lost for words, as my listeners know. I'm always, but yeah, it's amazing this format where you just get to talk to folks, and it creates a community, and you learn things about musicians or people that you never would have imagined. So,
Yeah.
yeah, and you're everywhere, right? It's on your website, but you're on all the usual places: Spotify and Amazon Music and Apple Podcasts
Right.
and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's called the Anthony Plog on music.
Right. Right. I think a critical interview for me was when I interviewed Marcus Humman, who's writes country music, folk music, country music, but he also has done musicals and operas. And I had no idea what that was going to be like. And we ended up doing 2 interviews that total almost like about 4 hours. And he was just great, and it was fantastic, and a great learning experience. Really inspiring the way he thinks about music, and talking
Wow.
about working with the Dixie Chicks, writing some of their hit songs and all that kind of stuff. So that made me think, boy, there are a lot of areas where I don't know anything. And so delving into new areas. An interview I just did a couple of days ago was with Lynn Larson, who's for I think maybe 33 years has been the personnel manager and recently the orchestra manager of the Boston Symphony. So what's that like? So it's been a great learning experience.
What fun! Yeah, I hope folks will go over there. And you've interviewed a who's who of trumpet players as well. So
yeah.
some,
Well, when I started out, people said I listened to interviews, about how to start a podcast, and a lot of people said start with your niche, start with what you know, and then gradually grow out from there. And so, for me, that was brass players.
Yeah. Well, that's really cool that you're doing that. And any other projects coming up? Are you working on any new compositions or anything you wanna spill the beans on?
Well, always working on compositions. I mean, that's my life, trying to get in as much time as I can composing. I think I'm known as a brass composer, but I've actually written 6 operas as well. So that takes a lot of time. Writing an opera takes a lot of time, and just trying to do as much writing as I can. I have a daughter who's 30 and a son who's 27. And so with my daughter, we have 2 grandchildren, maybe 1 year and 3 months, and then and the other boy is closing in on 4 years. And the last couple of years, actually, what I've done over the last maybe 6 or so years is I've done a couple of big hikes, did the John Muir Trail, actually both in California, John Muir Trail. And my son Jason did the entire Pacific Crest Trail this past year. Yeah, and I did the first 425 miles with him on that, starting in the border of Mexico to a little bit further north.
That's incredible.
So well, it's not incredible, but it's hard work.
Well,
that's for sure.
That's so you get out of Freiburg and go hike the Sierras, and actually the Verdugos and the Sierras and all the whole man. That's something I've always wanted to do. Maybe not the Pacific. Maybe not the Pacific Crest. Maybe Pacific Trail. Maybe I'll do the John Muir Trail.
John Muir's Trail is beautiful. It's really tough. There are 11 passes on the John Muir Trail, and so you're doing an awful lot of climbing. And very, very seldom are you level. You're either going up or you're going down. But the scenery is absolutely stunning. Just stunning.
Best in the world. Well, we'll do that on another podcast. We'll do we'll do hiking with Tony Plog.
Yeah. Well, I'm not an expert, that's for sure. But it's basically we'll just put one foot in front of the other.
We'll just chat about music and life and maybe a little trumpet, and I'll
that
have
would be
everything. Preston could be there with a backpack with all the recording gear, and we'll be hiking along.
Yeah, that sounds good. I would love that.
Oh, I love it. It wouldn't be a trumpet podcast if we got a little geeky. Can we talk a little bit about the equipment you used when you were playing? B flat, C. I mean, what horns did you use? Favorite mouthpiece, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, sure. I have to tell you though, I'm sort of, when I was a player, I was sort of like the anti-geek. I had a time once where I was at a 3-day trumpet festival someplace, and there was somebody from an instrument company or something started to ask me questions the first day. And I said, I really don't know that much about the trumpet or mouthpieces and stuff like that. And he thought, in those days, I don't know what it's like now, but he thought that I was one of these guys that was really secretive about my information, which was not the case. And at the end of the third day, he came up to me and he said, you really don't know anything about the trumpet, do you? And I said, yeah, that's what I've been trying to tell you. So I'll try to geek out with you, but I may be a total failure.
Yeah. Well,
so ask away and I'll do my best.
Well, just curious. I mean, did you have a favorite B flat, favorite C? What horns did you use primarily for your solo playing?
Yeah, I played a Bach 43. I think it was medium large B flat trumpet, and I had a Bach 229C that I used a lot. And then later on, Bob Malone, when he was working for Larry Minnick, made the first. This is before Yamaha. It was the first prototype actually for a Yamaha trumpet, I think. And he and Kenzo Kawasaki from who passed away just recently was over from Japan, and they put together this trumpet, which was a great trumpet. So I was really lucky with that C trumpet. I loved playing the G trumpet because especially in the key of C, I could use my regular mouthpiece, and it had a darker sound or a warmer sound than a piccolo trumpet. So those were sort of the trumpets I used when I started out playing. When I was like in my early 20s, I think I played a 3C, and then later ended up playing a 1.5C, and then maybe the last, I'm just guessing now, I have no idea, but maybe the last 10 years I played a wooden mouthpiece made by Brazelmeyer, which was, I think, a Brazelmeyer 2, which was about like a 1.5C.
And then piccolo?
Piccolo, the first piccolo I had was a Getzen. And then I think I had a Selmer, I think. I might have had a Schulke too. You can tell I'm really terrible with trumpets. That's like somebody I've only been married once, but that's like somebody who's been married 3 or 4 times and can't remember the name of a wife. That's sort of the way I am with some of my trumpets, I think.
Yeah. And then like the one mouthpiece question though, you said, would you change, you said you used your B flat or your C trumpet mouthpiece on the G trumpet but when you would shift to piccolo, would you go to a smaller mouthpiece or smaller diameter?
Yeah. And I had a Schulke. And again, I just didn't experiment with mouthpieces that much. I think I had a Schulke, and I have no idea what size it was, but it was smaller than a regular.
So,
yeah. What boy? I'm failing so far on this, I can tell.
It's okay. I'm sure someone will chime in and say, "Oh yeah, I remember Tony played this or that." One other thing I want to cover before we wrap you up here, and you've been so gracious with your time. One of the things that one of your blog posts, this is going back, I don't know, pre-pandemic. You talked about the 3-tier system, about like motivation and passion. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because that was something like my whole life growing up, I always struggled with, where I'd be inspired to do something, and then I'd go on and I'd practice, or I'd do whatever that project is for like 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden it would just taper, and reading your blog post really helped me both with my own playing, even though I wasn't really playing anymore, but also here with my business. So would you mind talking a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I had this, I think I was talking to Ron Kidd maybe about this, and got the idea that you could think that there are 3 tiers of really trying to be successful at something. And the first is motivation. You need to be motivated about something. And I guess that would be the passion.
Mm-hmm.
But motivation will only last so long. There are going to be days when you're not motivated, and so it's easy to fail if you're not motivated on a certain day. Fail is maybe too big of a word, but not do the work you should do. So the second tier is discipline. So if you can take your motivation and move that into discipline so that you're disciplined, then you can have more strength in what you're doing. I guess you can last longer. But even discipline, we're not disciplined our entire lives. And so then the third tier is habit. And if you can move that, if you can go from motivation to discipline to habit, then you've got it. Because you don't have to be motivated or even disciplined to brush your teeth. It's just a habit. You do it every day. And somehow if you miss it, it doesn't feel right. So if that means doing your warm up in the morning, maybe at the beginning you need to be motivated to get up at a certain time to do your warm up, but you can move that into discipline. And if you do it enough for enough time, maybe a couple of months, a couple of years, who knows, that becomes a habit, and then you just do it, and it feels not right when you're actually not doing it. So going from motivation to discipline to habit was what I was thinking about. And of
Awesome.
course, not trying to be type A about anything that you have to do this, or you have to do that, but just thinking of that as a way of doing things. There's a quote that I absolutely love from Richard Feynman, who was this genius physicist, but also had great common sense. And this quote is, "The main principle is you must never fool yourself, and you're the easiest person to fool." And I think about that a lot. And so I try not to fool myself, in terms of, am I motivated, or is this a habit, or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I'm not perfect at that at all. I'm a lot of things should be a habit that are not, but at least that's something that I try to aim for.
That's brilliant. And yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I know, like on a good day, it's easy to go in and practice, or easy to go in and compose. It's like, but what happens on the not easy days, and how do we handle those? And that's where the discipline and the habits come in. And so thank you for that blog post. And we'll link it as well in the show notes so folks who want to read that, because that coming across that really was, leadership books up the wazoo. And it's like, that was so succinct on the way you had written that, and it seemed so. It's almost too simple, It's like it can't be that easy. But the concept,
yeah. I'm sorry. There's a great quote I love from Gil McDougall, who was a shortstop for the New York Yankees in the maybe late 50s, early to mid 60s. A little bit profane, but he said, it's easy to have a great day when you're feeling great, and a horseshit day when you're feeling horseshit. The question is, can you have a great day when you're feeling horseshit? And I think, that's sort of a crude way of looking at it, but I think that's the goal, is we're not always going to have a good day, and to still try and make the bad days productive.
Absolutely.
Or joyful,
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, Tony, it's been a pleasure. And I'm sure,
this has been fun.
Yeah, we'll have to do it again, or do a live stream or something, if your time permits.
Love it.
What's the best place? Is it your website for folks to find out about your compositions, your podcast, or do you use social media at all?
Yeah, I'm not very good at social media. I need to be much better at social media. I'm terrible at that. So probably the best thing is just my website, which is anthonyplog.com. Okay. But I'm on Facebook, and Instagram also.
Wonderful. Well, it's been really cool having you on. Before I let you go, I have to ask you the one last final question, which would be,
Okay.
If you can, leave our listeners with your best piece of advice, what would that be?
Oh, wow. Boy,
always a doozy.
You ask really, really easy questions there. My best piece of advice. I think love what you do. Joseph Campbell said, "Find your bliss." I think if you can find something that you love to do, you're going to be pretty happy. I think Mark Twain said, something like, "If you love your work, you'll never work a day in your life," or something like that. I forget the exact quote. I don't know that that's advice, and boy, I wish I had time to think about that.
I find you get better answers if you come up on if you think about it and then it sounds canned.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But I think, I think love what you do, and also try to be kind to people. I mean, as simple as that sounds, just try. Yeah, I'd say try to do good work and try to be kind to people and enjoy life.
Absolutely. Beautiful advice. Thank you so much, Tony. It's been an honor having you on across the pond, halfway around the world. And next time you're at LA, hopefully we can get lunch or something together. Or actually even better, hopefully I can be over in Freiburg sometime soon.
That would be great. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Absolute honor having you on, Tony. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well, a huge thank you to Tony Plog for coming on the podcast. And I can't recommend his podcast enough, Anthony Plog on Music. As we talked about in our interview, he started with his friends, so primarily brass players, amazing trumpet players, Håkan Hardenberger, etc. And then he branches out into, much more eclectic field of musicians and entrepreneurs and whatnot. So definitely give it a listen. He's got a lot of episodes and I'm making my way through them. But every episode is just a jewel. So first of all, thank you, Tony, for coming on our podcast. It's an honor. And thank you for what you do with your podcast. Because on top of, the career of, notable career of trumpet playing and soloing and recording and all of the compositions that you've gifted the brass world and other musicians with, now the conversations you're having to pass on information and stories is just incredible. So thank you, Tony, for being on the podcast. You can learn more about Tony Plog on his website, anthonyplog.com. And we'll make sure we have that link down in the description and on the show notes for this episode. That's all we have. Thank you again for all of the 5-star reviews. I've seen those come in. Thank you all for the feedback you email me, and the guest list is getting longer and longer, chipping away at it one episode at a time. But keep them coming, keep the feedback coming, keep the ideas of who you want to hear on this podcast coming into me. John@bobreeves.com is the email address. And until next time, let's go out and make some music.